Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Human-Centered AI, Turning Complexity into Better Products. We will get started in just a minute. My name is Michaela Monahan, Director of Research Partnerships here at the Roux Institute at Northeastern University. And I'm really excited to kick off our talk today. Just give people another few seconds to join. I wanted to run through just a few housekeeping items before we get started as well. So again, welcome everyone. We're very excited to do this webinar today on human-centered AI. Again, my name is Michaela Monahan, Director of Research Partnerships here at the Roux Institute at Northeastern University. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the housekeeping items that we have before we get started. First, we will be recording this webinar, so if you have to jump early or would like to return to it later, you should receive a link after the event is over. And hopefully that will serve as a resource for you going forward. Next, today's webinar is geared towards a pretty wide audience. For some of our academic colleagues, we hope you find the talk interesting. It's really geared towards real-world industry applications and any professionals who are looking to develop more customer-adopted AI and software products. We will leave a few minutes at the end for a Q&A, so you can feel free to enter your questions into the chat function or the Q&A function that Teams provides. If we don't get to your question today, we can always follow up for a conversation. And lastly, connected to that, if you're interested in connecting with our experts that you'll meet today in just a moment, to kind of talk or explore about your specific product or questions, I'm happy to connect you with Melanie or Mahsan or any of our other experts. And my email is up on the screen, and we will also show it at the end. Right. Let's go ahead and jump in. Real quickly, before we do dive in, I just wanted to share a little bit of information about the Roux Institute. We are coming to you from Portland, Maine today. It's a beautiful day here in Maine. The Roux Institute is a campus of Northeastern University that launched 5 years ago with the mission of activating an innovation economy all across northern New England. We're combining graduate education in tech disciplines, entrepreneurship programs for startups, and translational research. Our presenters today, which you will meet in a minute, are part of our esteemed research faculty here at the Roux Institute. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Dr. Mahsan Nourani and Dr. Melanie Tory to introduce themselves and dive into today's presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Michaela, and welcome everybody. It's great to meet you here. So I'm Melanie Tory. I am professor of the practice at the Roux Institute, where I direct a team called the Human Data Interaction Research Team. And so we do all things around humans meeting technology. My own background is in data visualization and human-centered AI, and I build a lot of tools that involve humans interacting with data. And in particular, I've done a lot of work around natural language interaction with data, such as data chatbots. And with that, I'll let Mahsan introduce herself.
Thank you, Melanie. Thanks, Michaela. Hi, everyone. I'm a research professor here at Northeastern University in computer science, and I focus on human-centered and responsible AI, where I research how users understand and interact with AI systems, especially with AI-assisted decision-making. And on top of that, I also build AI interfaces for both research contexts and industry products that incorporate interactions, visualizations, and user interface elements to make sure to make sure that interfaces support both the users and the better decision making with AI. We're so happy to have you here today. The agenda generally, first we're going to talk about what human-centered AI is, which aligns with both of our expertises. You might hear us using the word HCAI, which stands for human-centered AI. We're going to talk about what it is and why it's important. And then we're going to kind of go over some human-centered AI approaches and strategies for improving long-term adoption and trust calibration for products. And then we're going to draw from some examples from our work to show how we apply these strategies in real-world products. And at the end, you can ask questions and we can answer them together. So let's dive in. What is human-centered AI? The traditional approach of building AI tools really focuses on building an AI tool or like an AI-centric design, like building a tool without actually considering how they're going to affect or influence users who are going to be involved in it or use it, which really interestingly is or comically shown in this image you can see here, which is the dark side of that perspective. Where you can see a computer or an AI system dictating to the user what they need to do, and like without actually considering what they think or their decisions or their opinions. And as you can see, the person looks really frustrated because of wanting to contribute to that decision-making process. And in reality, people are at the heart of AI systems. They are either users of it or they are affected by decisions made by others who use it. So to kind of make sure that we focus on the users and people who are involved with it, we kind of there's this discipline that is emerging and is called HCAI that intends to create AI systems that amplify and augment people's capabilities as opposed to try to displace those abilities. And generally speaking, they try to figure out ways to preserve human control to ensure AI meets their needs without, while also like focusing on other important factors like preserving transparency, delivering equitable outcomes, and respecting users' privacy and so on. So the so-called AI-centered design that the traditional way focuses on building rapid AI tools and solving issues that might arise later on, HCAI takes a different approach and tries to focus on deliberate engagement with users and stakeholders throughout the design process. So you can see this this concept in a nutshell here, where we need to basically focus on starting very early on with customer discovery, to figure out what are the different use cases, what are the users' needs, what is there even a need for the product, what should the product look like by engaging with the people, and then even continuing to involving and co-designing the product and solutions with stakeholders, domain expert, target users, and iteratively refine those designs and prototypes and implementations to even evaluating the final product and the design that you came up with and within your product to make sure that they kind of they are acceptable and relevant to the users, specifically based on things that you found out throughout the project. So now that you learned what the human-centered AI actually means, I'm going to pass it to Melanie, who's going to tell you a little bit more about why it's important.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mahsan. So really, as Mahsan described, human-centered AI involves users throughout the whole design process in order to build products that are useful for them. And the reason this matters is because it really de-risks the development process. You can imagine that if your organization has devoted many hours, months, even years into product development time, engineer time, and so on in building a particular product, and then it ultimately is not adopted, that's a huge waste of time and resources. And so building the wrong thing is risky. And human-centered AI is designed to try to help you build the right thing in the first place. We do that in part by starting from the beginning and making certain that we truly understand who the users are, what context they're in, and what needs they have, so that we can make certain that we're building something that will actually meet those needs and ultimately have a higher chance of adoption. We do this through an extensive process of iterative design and evaluation involving users at every stage. And we inform that whole process by established principles of human-centered AI. And ultimately, this strengthens usability and adoption and really de-risks the product and reduces its chance of failure or abandonment. So I'd like to illustrate an example that we'll come back to throughout this talk. Mahsan and I work in a number of different application domains, but one project that we've both been involved in is a project we call the HEART project. And I'd like to use this one because it illustrates sort of all of the different aspects of human-centered AI in our work. So HEART stands for Healthcare Enabled by AI in Real Time. It's a collaboration between our team at the Roux Institute, other researchers here as well, Maine Health, and Nihon Koden. And the goal of the HEART project is to build an AI tool that will work in an intensive care unit or ICU to make predictions about patients and specifically any kind of adverse events that might happen to them. That could include kidney failure, sepsis, and so on. And the goal here is that if the AI can identify those kinds of likely adverse events really early, before the clinicians might be aware of them, we can inform the clinicians about that risk and hopefully enable them to intervene earlier and reduce these adverse events from happening. So there are many people and many aspects involved in this project. Mahsan and I are particularly focused on the interface component that will provide the recommendations or insights from the AI algorithm back to clinicians in the hospital to help them make decisions about patient care. So going back to these steps that Mahsan introduced earlier in the HCAI process, I'd like to illustrate how we realize those in this real project in the cardiothoracic ICU context. So this diagram of our various steps in the process looks complicated, but I'll step through it piece by piece. We started with customer discovery. Our goal here was to really understand the problem and the people that we were designing for. So to tackle this in the ICU context, we did a field study where researchers went out into the ICU itself and interviewed a bunch of different users and stakeholders in different roles to understand design goals, understand their needs, and understand things like barriers to them ultimately trusting and adopting an AI assistant. From there, we moved into prototyping and implementation, and this was a real iterative process where we tried some different designs, got feedback from caregivers as well as other stakeholders like clinical software engineers, and iteratively improved on those designs until we came to a design that seemed quite promising. We then evaluated that design with the end users through an expert walkthrough process, and again, iteratively improved upon it based on feedback that came out of that evaluation. And at this stage of the product where we are right now, we have a finalized design that is being actively implemented with a goal to roll this out to a particular ICU and actually test it in practice. So we're in the process of making refinements to the design and planning the rollout and training that will go along with it so that we can ultimately do an impact evaluation in the ICU. So along this process of moving from planning through implementation to design, one of the things that we were thinking about was ways that we could specifically strategize to ensure adoption for the long term rather than people abandoning the product. Some of you may be familiar with Gartner's AI hype cycle, which is depicted here on the screen, and it illustrates how products tend to move through the sort of adoption and potentially abandonment cycle. And I'd like to illustrate the hype cycle with an example from my own home. So in my house, my family decided to adopt a smart speaker for our kitchen. And when we first got the smart speaker, everyone was really excited about it. And we had all kinds of ideas of things we might use it for. You know, it could be used to look up recipes or do web searches, order things online, all these different ideas we had. So we were in this peak of inflated expectations where there was a lot of hype. We were excited about it, but we didn't really necessarily have realistic expectations of what it could and couldn't do. And then it turned out that as we tried all these different things, almost all of these use cases failed. The smart speaker just kind of disappointed. It didn't give us the results we were expecting when we would ask all of those questions. And so this takes us to the sort of trough of disillusionment. And this is a place where users are disappointed, and there's a huge risk that they will simply abandon the product altogether. That could have happened in my kitchen smart speaker case, but fortunately we had a few wins. There were a couple of things that the smart speaker did work well for. So now my family has kind of tempered our expectations, and we now use it for two things. It's a kitchen timer, and we use it to check the weather. And so this has moved us into what we call the plateau of productivity, where we have realistic expectations of what the product can and can't do, and we are able to consistently use it for specific use cases and do that consistently with success. And so what we want to take away from this AI hype cycle for either the design or the rollout of AI products is to think about ways where we could help people sort of avoid or mitigate that trough of disillusionment where they might just simply abandon. And so there are a number of ways where as designers, we can think about doing that. One of those is to design or implement AI for specific use cases. So rather than thinking of the AI tool that's a one-size-fits-all and does everything, it's more likely to be successful if the AI is specifically chosen or implemented or designed for very particular things. For example, in my kitchen case, if my family had more realistic expectations about the things that the smart speaker could and couldn't do, we might have avoided some of those disappointing trials. Secondly, we can involve users and stakeholders throughout the design process, and we've been emphasizing that throughout this talk and will continue to do so. And this is a way of ensuring we understand what need we're meeting, we know what the use case is and how the system is going to solve it, and we make sure we understand our users well enough that we know how to meet their needs. Thirdly, we can try to temper expectations a little bit so that people coming in for the first time have a good idea of what the system's capabilities and limitations are. And this will kind of temper this problem of trying things that it's not capable of doing and then being disappointed. And finally, we can empower our users, for example, through training and education that is specifically designed and aligned with the product release or rollout. And in this way, we can guide our users into successful strategies for working with and using the system. And with that, I'd like to turn it back to Mahsan to talk about trust.
Thank you, Melanie. Okay, so I think the concept of trust in AI and like it became super hyped up and something that a lot of people are looking for. And a lot of times AI solution stakeholders prioritize or kind of want to prioritize increasing user trust in the system. And they look at it as a goal. But is the system actually trustworthy, and is it always deserving of the trust to be given to it? And what I always like to think about is that human trust as a comparison, you might actually, like, when you have a person, like you some relationship, you might not necessarily always trust that person, or you decide to, like, okay, this person is not always trustworthy, there are situations that I can rely on them or not, and sometimes you're like, okay, yeah, this person is trustworthy. So it's more like it's not an on and off, like 0 or 1 problem. It's more about when, like, figuring out if that person is trustworthy or not. And the same thing actually applies in AI systems. So instead of actually prioritizing increasing trust, what instead we need to think about is calibrating the trust. So more trust should not be the goal. Instead of focusing on that, we should think of the concept, or prioritize the concept of meaningful trust and calibrating that trust, which means focusing on trusting the tool when it's deserving of that trust, and let people build those healthy skepticisms and calibrate their own trust as they are using the system. In more of a realistic scenario, as I said, it's more of a spectrum. In a higher end of the spectrum, users might actually overtrust the system, where they might actually rely on the system when the AI tool is not really deserving of that trust, and that can lead to decision-making failures. When the AI is making mistakes and your users are relying on those mistakes. And on the other end of the spectrum is undertrust, which is the opposite situation. Maybe the users are too skeptical, or too reliant on themselves, and they are just deciding not to do what the AI says. In cases even divert and literally do the opposite of the thing that the AI is suggesting, which can also lead to problematic decision making. And in reality, it's kind of somewhere in between. Within the spectrum, users need to, like, continue working with the AI, as Melanie's great example with the voice assistant suggested. Use it and understand what the expectations are, and then try to calibrate those expectations of when the model is trustworthy enough to rely on it and when it's not. So, moving forward, I know, like, this concept of trust and even calibration is very abstract and it's hard to think about, but we have found some strategies that we have applied to our own, like, design products and our own research, and we would like to share some of these strategies with you. So first of all, trust has different meanings within different products, within different applications for AI. And the first step is to understand what trust actually means for your users and your products. You need to identify those trust relationships, what factors actually influence that trust building and calibration, or even loss of trust. What does it mean for your tool and product if users exhibit over reliance or under reliance behavior? Sometimes maybe it's okay, sometimes they might actually be very disastrous. So you need to kind of actively think about these problems. And by knowing more about what trust means in the context of your users and your product, you can help them navigate trust and support trust calibration. And particularly, one way of doing that is figure out ways to communicate those uncertainties or limitations of the AI to the users without being afraid that they're not gonna adopt the AI. So in Melanie's example, if somebody communicated that, hey, there are some limitations, here are the things you can do, maybe, like, that type of disappointment didn't happen, or the loss of trust would not happen generally. So a lot of times, by showing these limitations early on and through the product design, you can help people navigate that trust and support the calibration that they need to do. And in some cases, there is this concept and notion of AI being super complicated and people not understanding how it's making these decisions or how it's coming to those decisions. Sometimes you might have heard they exemplify AI as a black box, and it kind of saying like we don't really know what's going on behind the wall or behind the box. But there's this concept of AI transparency, which is, let's add explainability. Let's get the AI to explain its decision-making process, or why is it doing certain things. And in some cases, AI transparency can really be powerful and help people understand why those decisions are made and decide, okay, well, is this a time that I need to rely on this particular recommendation, or is it like, correct for the right reasons or the wrong reasons? And then there's also the social aspect of trust. There might be in different communities and different domains, there might be some hesitations towards using AI. There's also this concept of algorithmic aversion, where people exhibit signs of, I don't know, maybe it's coming from fear or like reluctance to adopt new technology. Whatever it is, it's more like, I'm not trying to rely on the technology because I can do better myself. But in situations where AI actually is capable, that can become, challenging and problematic. So if there are people like local champions within that context and within that product, for the users, that can kind of talk about the positives and like help like champion the product for the rollout, that can actually help building that trust or help people calibrate the trust better. So now that you learned about these strategies and some of these, we wanted to share some of the ways that we have applied these strategies in our own work, with the Heart Project as the example. So going back to this design process, what we did with the Heart Project, which, as a reminder, it was an AI support tool within ICU, which is a very critical context to help the ICU caregivers come up with or understand critical situations that patients go through. So with this particular example, what we did was from the beginning, from the field study to rollout, we continuously involved the users in the design. And particularly one main focus of this goal, one thing that guided us through this whole process was the critical need for trust calibration, given the high stakes scenario of the application. We thought about trust throughout the whole AI lifecycle as we were working with developing this tool with the other partners. Going back to the customer discovery, we basically decided to identify and focus on one use case that can support caregivers within their context instead of focusing on too many things. In reality, there are so many possible use cases of AI within the ICU context, and we just decided to focus on one to actually make sure that it's supporting the users. Oh, oops, sorry. I skipped two things here. So the other thing is we, throughout the customer discovery phase, we try to understand what trust means to the ICU folks, what are their hesitations and worries about AI adoption, and what are their needs that we can support and build the product around that need. The other way that we apply that strategy in practice was setting expectations about how the AI should be used, or what are its capabilities and limitations. And specifically, we've done this by setting expectations through communicating errors, uncertainties, and limitations. So this was done by using warning language in the UI, using uncertainty communications, information nuggets and insights, different color codings. We use different unique visualizations and interactions that are specific to this particular use case and context. All of this was done while we were trying to receive rapid feedback from users and stakeholders to make sure that the final design of each of these designs that we came up with actually makes sense to them and is useful for them. And the other problem, or in this case, because a lot of caregivers are trying to like understand what the AI is actually you know, not just what AI is suggesting, but they also want to know what is it giving those suggestions and understand the justification. And so from the early stages, it was really clear to us that this translates to AI transparency, and this is very important for this particular context. So we turned that to a set of ideas and designs and implemented different approaches to AI explainability, and constantly worked with our engineers and used the state-of-the-art solutions to make sure that it actually supports them. And finally, now that we are in the rollout plan phase, we are continuously working with clinicians to build the tool in a way that fits within their workflows. And we want to make sure that we design, training plans that, support and explain to users what each of the aspects and features of the interface means, how to use the system, what are the model limitations, where is the training data coming from, and so on and so forth. So it kind of becomes very important to make sure, people understand what the system is capable of, and that helps them with longer term adaptation and trust calibration. That wraps up our example. Over to you, Melanie.
Okay, thank you, Mahsan. So to conclude our talk, over the course of the last half hour, we've introduced the idea of human-centered AI, what it is, what some of its challenges are. And we walked you through a few strategies for long-term adoption and trust calibration in products, which might be useful whether you're building AI products yourself or rolling them out within your organization. So with that, you may be wondering what you can do next. Perhaps you're unsure if incorporating AI is right for your organization. Maybe you're ready to adopt it, but you don't know where to start. Maybe you're building an AI tool, but you're unsure how to design for users or for success. Or maybe you already have an AI tool and you want to improve its adoption and effectiveness. So regardless of where you're at in your organization's use of AI, we're here to help. Our team brings interdisciplinary expertise in human-centered AI and many related disciplines, as well as neighboring disciplines like AI itself, data science, and domain expertise. And we are here to help. We're happy to connect and have a consult with you if you would like to chat with us. And with that, I think I will end here and turn it over to Michaela, who's going to manage the Q&A.
Great, thank you, Melanie. So we have gotten to the Q&A portion of our webinar. And so if you do have questions that you'd like Melanie and Mahsan to address, feel free to chat them into the Q&A function. And we will figure out one of you to take it, or maybe both of you will. I'm just checking the chats, and it looks like we have a couple coming in. So let's see. Let's start it. Okay, here's one. So the question is basically around that the attendee. We already started implementing AI into our products. Is it kind of too late to bring in human-centered AI expertise? Like, what if you're, I guess kind of how I interpret that is like, what if you're, halfway through the development process? Is it too late? Melanie or Mahsan, does one of you want to take that?
Sure, I could take it. I would say it's never too late. It's always best to start as early as you can, because the earlier you truly understand your users, the more the design process can adapt accordingly. But that said, it's never too late to bring a user voice into the conversation, even if the product is mostly implemented and you're looking to evaluate with end users and tweak things. That's still a great thing to do. And so never too late.
Great. And Mahsan, feel free to jump in if you do have. thoughts there.
Melanie did a great job. I would have given the same answer.
Great, great. So another, as I'm looking at here, another question that's coming is, I guess, around buy-in from different functional areas within a company or organization. So I see why human-centered AI would be important. Sometimes our engineering team is moving really quickly and building the products. Do you have any tips for how I can convince the company and the engineering team to sort of maybe pause for a second and look into the human-centered AI angle? Because it's not necessarily top of mind for a lot of people.
Do you want to take the first stab at it, Mahsan?
I can take over and you at what okay, Brain. Yeah, I think a lot of the way I would see it is you shouldn't or it's not like contradictory to what the engineers are trying to do. I see it more as a complementing expertise, right? They're already building a tool. They're spending thousands of dollars, if not millions, and trying to design a product that fits the need, and lots of hours from the engineering team. So there is a huge risk of building a product, spending all that money, time, and effort, and then basically the product failing or not getting adopted, or people just not liking it, and then they ended up like they will end up having to like change the product out halfway through, and that is even like more added costs and more problems down the line. So in reality, the way I see it is you basically are helping those engineering teams. You are on the same team. You're trying to like build like an understanding of what the product should look like before they actually implement things, and then implement it once or kind of iteratively refine it, so that it saves a lot of manpower, money, and so on. Melanie, is there anything you would add to this?
No, I would just re-emphasize the point that you're essentially de-risking the design by bringing in a human-centered approach, and you're potentially saving yourself a lot of time and resources, like you said, in case you were building the wrong thing.
Great. Thank you. We get this kind of a question a lot, I would say, at the Roux Institute, but we have one or two that are coming in around kind of, I know that our company needs to get into AI. We just don't know where to start. Like what should we do? We're feeling nervous that competitors are adopting AI faster than we are. We don't necessarily have time to even catch up to that, let alone this concept of human-centered AI and making sure that we're and taking a pause to get the user feedback. Kind of, so even that budgeting time for that is tricky. So do you have any advice about like where to even begin?
Yeah, so I guess I'd address the point that, going back to de-risking design, bringing your users into the process actually should hopefully save you time and effort in the long run, because it will help you scope more effectively if you're bringing in AI, right? Instead of trying to solve 100 things, you'll be able to narrow in onto the one or two things that you could tackle first to have a real, the biggest possible impact. And so I guess I'd emphasize that any amount of talking to your users and understanding what they need will actually kind of help you save time. You can bring in consultants. Our team is here to help if you want to come and get some advice, and start small, right? Pick a use case, tackle it, and start there. Don't try to boil the ocean. Just try to pick one thing that can make an impact.
Yeah, I would also like to add something here. I feel like there's the fear of missing out is huge in technology, but history shows us that, like, you might feel like you're falling behind your competitors, but as like the adoption the AI adoption diagram showed, that might like die down at some point because people start realizing, well, those products that are ahead of you, they're not actually supporting the need. So in general, like, if you do it well starting the beginning, then you might actually catch up and do better in competition with other companies, who are in the same field. So I feel like it's actually a good investment ahead of time as opposed to spending so much money more down the line.
Right? I think we have time for a couple more. Um, there there is a question coming in around maybe getting a little bit more detail about how to research trust or measure trust and therefore, calibrate trust. So curious if you can provide any more context or insights about how to go about researching and getting insights on the user trust aspect.
I can I can take a stab at it first. Trust trust in AI is like a huge research area, and I have done a lot of research for the past couple of years on it, and I know there are a lot of researchers working on this. And it's really dependent on your context and your product. So it's not something that I can say here is one solution. But there are different ways of measuring trust given the product. Like, you can focus on there are like different types of questionnaires, different types of measures you can opt, like based on people's mental models or understanding, and then kind of measure it over time. So then, like, you can kind of see a diagram, like, or ways of how people are calibrating their trust over time. And then there's also like other approaches that are more user-centered early on, like kind of as I talked about during the talk. Engaging with the users and understanding what trust means to them. It's another way. So it's more like you can do interviews or talk to them. But at the same time, I know it's a very complex situation and scenario. And I believe you should talk to people who are experts on this. And our team is here to help, but there's also like generally human-centered AI folks should be able to support that need of how to measure trust or how to calibrate it with your own particular context.
Awesome. Thank you. We have time for, I think, just one more question. So this sort of relates to the first question that I was asking about, but it's around just best practices for keeping feedback and user insights fresh. So how do you keep user engagement and feedback coming post go live with a product? Are there best practices that you recommend on these feedback to build these feedback mechanisms into into how you do things in the product development and post-launch process?
Yeah, I can take that one. So I think this varies a little bit depending on whether you're a company doing a rollout of a product within your own organization and you're looking for feedback on that, versus if you're a software developer building the product and then releasing it in the wild. If you're a software developer and you're releasing the product in the wild for many users to use, I would suggest having a sort of planned strategy of many different sources of input coming back in to give you feedback. That might include deliberately planned, focus groups or interviews with particular customers of how they're using it, what's working, what's not working. But it would also include channels like product support cases, for example, what's coming into the support team, what challenges are people facing. It would also include things like in-product telemetry, where you're collecting data automatically on how it's being used, on errors that are occurring, on how people are behaving with it. And it may also include product managers going out and interviewing particular customers, which might be done in the process of kind of planning the next phase of development to try to figure out what's next, but can also gain feedback on what's coming. If you are doing a rollout within your own organization, you're going to be a little bit more localized, and you probably want to set up specific opportunities for the team to give feedback and well, just to get feedback. So that might include planning the rollout process in phases, where instead of giving it to 100,000 employees, you might go team by team and get feedback from smaller teams that you can use to plan the next phases of the rollout. It might include having web forms where people can ask questions, get support, give feedback, or meetings or other kind of planned mechanisms of getting feedback back in for your process.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we are at time. So I just want to say a quick thank you to everybody for attending today's webinar. You will receive a recording link following this event, so feel free to share that with colleagues if they would find this of help. And again, if you would like to connect to explore human-centered AI implications and get even more of the expertise from Melanie and Mahsan that you're hearing today for your specific product or company, I'd be happy to connect you with them or some of our experts, other experts. So please reach out. Again, my email is on this screen, and we'll include it in the follow-up as well. Well, and with that, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.